The 1970s gave us more than blockbusters and gritty crime sagas. In hushed courtrooms and echoing chambers, filmmakers staged battles of conscience, power, and truth. These legal dramas didn't just entertain, they exposed cracks in justice itself. Forgotten by many, they still burn with intensity. Let's return to the decade when cinema put the law itself on trial. 1. And Justice for All, 1979. A man explodes in fury, his voice tearing across the courtroom. "You're out of order!" Al Pacino, in one of his most searing performances, doesn't just play lawyer Arthur Kirkland. He embodies the rage of a man betrayed by the very system he swore to serve. The scene is burned into cinema's memory, a moment where law collides with raw humanity. Arthur begins as an idealist. He wants justice, believes in fairness. But as cases pile up and compromises suffocate him, he faces impossible choices. Defend the corrupt or risk disbarment, protect innocence or lose everything. His relationships fracture under the weight. Clients despair, colleagues betray him, even his own principles begin to collapse. Pacino's every line, shouted or whispered, carries the sting of disillusionment. Released in 1979, the film landed in a post-Watergate America scarred by institutional distrust. Audiences didn't just see a story of one man versus the system. They saw their own anxieties reflected back. The marketing leaned into Pacino's firebrand performance, and the box office responded. Critics praised its audacity, though some were unsettled by its bleak honesty. Its legacy endures in its brutal candor. Unlike tidy courtroom dramas where justice prevails neatly. And Justice for All dared to ask, what happens when the law itself becomes guilty? The final monologue, furious, unrestrained, still feels like an alarm bell. It wasn't just Pacino's courtroom, it was America's, and the echoes haven't faded. 2. The Verdict, 1972. A weary man sits in a bar, glass in hand, shoulders slumped. The camera lingers. This isn't the confident attorney of glossy dramas, but a man eroded by years of compromise. In Franklin Schaffner's The Verdict, 1972, Peter Finch portrays a defense lawyer trapped between survival and principle, a role steeped in quiet devastation. The story follows him as he takes on a high-profile case, one loaded with political pressure and moral consequence. His client's innocence becomes secondary to the machinations of power. Every courtroom scene is thick with tension, less about law and more about the weight of conscience. His relationships suffer, trust collapses. He is no noble hero, but a man battered by his own choices. Overshadowed by flashier thrillers, the film struggled for visibility upon release. It wasn't marketed as a spectacle. It was too quiet, too brooding, too heavy for audiences craving escapism. Yet critics recognized its daring restraint. It was less about the verdict itself than the personal cost of carrying justice on your back. Though often forgotten beside Sidney Lumet's 1982 film of the same name, this verdict carved an important niche. It showed that legal drama could be as much about silence as speeches, about hesitation as much as heroics. Its courtroom fireworks were embers, not explosions, but they burned long and low, leaving scars. Today, it serves as an early blueprint for the decade's grittier courtroom tales. It asked viewers to consider not just what justice means, but what it demands from those who pursue it. 3. The Lawyer, 1970. A sterile courtroom, fluorescent lights humming overhead. A young attorney rises, his suit too sharp, his confidence just bordering arrogance. Barry Newman's Tony Petrocelli doesn't yet know the toll this case will take, but in that moment, he is all swagger and sharp edges, a lawyer who thinks he can bend the system to his will. The lawyer follows Petrocelli as he defends a man accused of murder. The evidence is damning, the witnesses unwavering. To everyone else, the case looks lost. But Petrocelli senses something beneath the surface, cracks in testimony, hidden motives. The deeper he digs, the more the trial becomes a battle, not only for his client's life, but for his own faith in the system. Released in 1970, the film was marketed as raw and realistic, drawing on the headlines of the era. Courtroom dramas had often been clean, theatrical. The lawyer was messy, sweat-soaked, and full of doubt. It wasn't a major hit, but it earned enough of a following to spawn the television series Petrocelli, which carried Newman's character into households for years. Critics noted its unvarnished portrayal of trial law. There were no easy wins, no soaring speeches that wrapped cases in a bow. Instead, it revealed the grind of legal work, the paperwork, the mistrials, the endless questioning of witnesses who may or may not be telling the truth. Its legacy lies in its humanity. Petrocelli was no perfect hero. He stumbled, he second-guessed, he fought on instinct, and in that imperfection he felt real. For audiences tired of courtroom melodrama, the lawyer gave them something different, a lawyer who bled. 4. Justice at Nuremberg, 1971 TV film. The image is chilling. Men once robed in power now sit stripped, accused, forced to answer for crimes that scarred humanity. Justice at Nuremberg, 1971, a television drama, dared to bring one of history's most harrowing trials into American living rooms. It was not just courtroom spectacle. It was moral reckoning. The film dramatizes the Nuremberg trials with stark intimacy. At its center are prosecutors, burdened with proving guilt while knowing no punishment could equal the suffering inflicted. Every testimony is a knife. Every verdict is both triumph and tragedy. The judges themselves, embodiments of law twisted into weapons, become symbols of how fragile justice can be when corrupted. Though designed for television, its production rivaled theatrical releases. Audiences tuned in not for entertainment, but for confrontation. This was history retold in fluorescent light, a reminder that law is not abstract, but visceral, tied to blood and memory. Critics praised its bravery. Some viewers recoiled at its unflinching tone. Its impact, however, was undeniable. Before wider cinematic treatments reached theaters, Justice at Nuremberg planted seeds of awareness, forcing ordinary viewers to confront questions once reserved for scholars and survivors. What does justice mean when the crime itself feels beyond human scale? Can a trial heal or only record? The film's legacy lingers in education and conscience. It reminded audiences that courtroom dramas are not always fiction. Sometimes they are the thin line between civilization and collapse. In 1971, it made viewers shudder. Today, it still makes them think. 5. The Domino Principle, 1977. A prison yard drenched in shadows. A man, hardened by years inside, suddenly offered freedom, not by parole, but by deal. The domino principle sets its stage not in the courtroom's clean lines, but in the corruption that feeds into it. Gene Hackman plays Roy Tucker, a man manipulated into the service of unseen forces, his fate tied to trials that never truly judge guilt or innocence, only usefulness. Tucker is no saint. He's a murderer, but also a man desperate for redemption. His relationship with his wife becomes the only light in a story otherwise consumed by betrayal. The courtroom, when it comes, is less a stage of justice than a theater of power where verdicts are orchestrated by invisible hands. Hackman plays Tucker with quiet rage, a man both used and discarded. Released in 1977, The Domino Principle arrived when conspiracy thrillers dominated American cinema. Post-Watergate audiences were ready to believe in corruption at the highest levels. The marketing leaned heavily on Hackman's star power, but the film's darker themes limited its reach. Critics were divided. Some praised its ambition, others dismissed it as too bleak, too labyrinthine. Its legacy, however, is clear. By weaving conspiracy into courtroom drama, it showed how fragile the legal system could appear when manipulated by unseen interests. For many, it was less about Tucker's trial than about the unsettling realization. In the real world, justice often has strings attached. 6. The Nelson Affair, aka Bequest to the Nation, 1973. A courtroom bathed in candlelight. Naval heroes and political giants turned defendants. The Nelson Affair, though marketed as a historical drama, carries all the weight of a legal battle staged on the grandest of scales. Starring Glenda Jackson and Peter Finch, it explores Admiral Nelson's scandalous relationship with Lady Hamilton and the fallout that touched both war and law. The drama unfolds not in the trenches, but in drawing rooms and tribunals, where reputations are dissected like evidence. Nelson, immortalized as a naval legend, becomes vulnerable under social judgment. Lady Hamilton, fiery and defiant, stands at the heart of the conflict, not only his lover, but his co-defendant in the trial of public morality. Their relationship burns even as it threatens to consume them. Released in 1973, the film was lushly produced and handsomely cast, though its box office was modest. Critics praised Jackson's performance, noting her ability to shift a courtroom drama into something more intimate and bruising. The verdict on Nelson's reputation, of course, was already history, but the film dared to suggest that even legends could be undone in courts of gossip and power. Its impact lies in reframing history as trial. Not every courtroom has benches and gavels. Some exist in parlors, newspapers, and the judgment of society itself. The Nelson Affair proved that even heroes can stand accused, and sometimes the harshest verdicts come not from judges, but from history's pen. 7. The Boys from Brazil, 1978. Imagine a courtroom where the evidence isn't documents or testimony, but the future of mankind. The Boys from Brazil may be remembered as a sci-fi thriller, yet at its core lies one of the decade's most chilling legal dramas, a trial by ideology. Gregory Peck plays Dr. Joseph Mengele, the Nazi scientist hiding in South America, pursued not just by vengeance, but by the possibility of being brought to justice. At the heart of the story is Ezra Lieberman, played by Laurence Olivier, a weary Nazi hunter. His pursuit is driven less by law than by morality. Yet as the plot unfolds, courtroom tension seeps into the narrative. The evidence is horrifying, the witnesses terrified, the stakes far greater than a single man. This is not a trial in one chamber. It is humanity itself under cross-examination. Released in 1978, the film's high-concept premise fascinated audiences. Peck, against type, was chilling as Mengele, while Olivier brought gravitas to the pursuit. Critics were divided, some dismissing its premise as too sensational, but others saw it as a daring blend of thriller and courtroom allegory. Its lasting power rests in its questions. What does justice look like when crimes are monstrous, when evidence is almost too large to process? The Boys from Brazil dared to ask whether a courtroom, any courtroom, could ever contain the enormity of such evil. In its haunting way, it answered, perhaps not, but cinema could. 8th, Trial by Combat, aka A Dirty Night's Work, 1976. A knight in armor, sword raised, in the middle of a modern courtroom. The image is absurd, almost comic, and yet Trial by Combat plays it straight. A group of vigilantes, disgusted by criminals slipping through the legal system, decide to revive medieval justice. Sword fights replace closing arguments. Juries are cast aside in favor of duels. At its heart, the film satirizes the growing disillusionment of the 1970s with modern law. The characters, a mixture of aristocrats and disillusioned idealists, are bound by frustration. The courts, they claim, have failed. Their relationships fracture as they debate morality. Is trial by combat truly justice, or merely another spectacle of violence? Released in 1976, the film starred Donald Pleasance and John Mills, lending gravitas to its outrageous premise. It was marketed partly as black comedy, partly as social satire. Audiences were perplexed. Critics, however, recognized its boldness. Underneath the absurdity lay a serious question about whether justice had become performative rather than principled. Though largely forgotten today, its legacy is cultish. Trial by combat embodied the 1970s distrust of institutions, turning a courtroom into a battlefield, both literal and symbolic. It reminded viewers that justice, left untended, can easily regress into ritual and bloodshed. In its strange way, it delivered fireworks few films dared to ignite. 9. The People vs. Gene Harris, 1979 TV film. A woman, elegant and composed, sits in the defendant's chair. Her crime? Killing the man she loved? Dr. Herman Tarnower, the famous Scarsdale diet doctor. The People vs. Gene Harris, 1979, though produced for television, delivered courtroom fireworks that rivaled the decade's biggest films. Gene Harris, played with quiet intensity, is painted as both victim and villain, a school headmistress undone by passion, betrayal, and despair. The courtroom scenes are tense, not for shouting matches, but for the subtle collapse of composure. Witnesses trade whispers of scandal. Lawyers peel away at her dignity. Harris herself hovers between fragility and steel. The release, timed with America's growing obsession with true crime, sparked headlines. Audiences tuned in not just for drama, but to dissect a real case that blurred morality. Critics praised its restraint, no melodrama, just the devastating reality of a woman who may have loved too much or too destructively. Its impact rests in the way it humanized scandal. Before tabloid television, before court TV, this film gave ordinary viewers a seat inside the trial, and it asked a question that still unsettles. Can love itself be a crime? 10. The Paper Chase, 1973. Rows of students scribbling furiously. A professor's voice, sharp and unrelenting, cuts through the silence. This is The Paper Chase, not a courtroom battle, but a legal drama of a different kind. Released in 1973, it follows first-year Harvard law student James Hart as he collides with Professor Charles Kingsfield, played with icy brilliance by John Houseman. Hart is young, idealistic, eager. Kingsfield is commanding, merciless, a man who treats the classroom as a courtroom. Their relationship is a duel, not of swords or gavels, but of intellect and will. Around them swirl friendships, romances, and breakdowns, all casualties of the brutal world of legal education. The film was an unlikely success, earning Houseman an Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor and spawning a long-running television series. Audiences, especially students, recognized the battlefield it depicted, a place where ambition and fear ruled, where the pursuit of law left scars as deep as any trial. Its legacy is profound. The Paper Chase proved that legal drama didn't always need a jury box to deliver tension. Sometimes the fiercest trials occur in lecture halls, where futures hang in balance, and the verdict comes not from judges, but from grades. For many, it remains the ultimate depiction of law school's ruthless crucible. 11th Court Martial of Lieutenant Calley, 1973, TV film. A soldier in uniform, standing before judgment, not of enemy nations, but of his own country. The Court-Martial of Lieutenant Calley, 1973, dramatized one of the most controversial trials of its time, the prosecution of William Calley for his role in the My Lai massacre during the Vietnam War. The film recreates the military courtroom where questions of obedience, morality, and atrocity were laid bare. Calley, played with a mix of arrogance and unease, embodies the conflict between personal responsibility and systemic failure. Witnesses tremble. Officers argue over the meaning of orders. The trial becomes less about one man and more about America itself. Released only 2 years after Calley's real-life conviction, the film was explosive. Audiences divided sharply. Some saw him as a scapegoat, others as a war criminal. The production leaned into this tension, offering no easy answers, only the haunting image of a man caught between patriotism and guilt. Its legacy is one of courage. Rarely had television dared to confront such raw wounds so soon. Court-martial of Lieutenant Calley asked whether law could deliver justice for war's horrors or whether some crimes remained beyond verdict. The fireworks here were not just legal, they were national, burning into conscience. The 1970s left us courtrooms of rage, classrooms of fear, and tribunals of conscience. These films remind us that justice, on screen and off, is fragile and fierce. Keep exploring the shadows of cinema with us. Subscribe, like, and join the rediscovery of stories Hollywood left behind.